Okay, looks like we should be good to start. Thanks for joining me for this month's webinar on secrets to predictable and repeatable hiring. If this is your first time joining us, then welcome and also a little belated Happy New Year. I'm Annette with the Recruiterbox team, and if you've ever written into support at Recruiterbox.com, then you might recognize my name. Our webinars consist of me chatting for about 20 minutes, and then I leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. Before we get too far into the new year, I wanted to host a webinar to introduce some ideas and tips you may want to introduce to your team's hiring. The new year is a great time to rethink our habits and ask ourselves whether what we're doing is working or not. And if not, what can we do to improve? So today I'll be discussing how to identify your true hiring need and then how to manage your hiring efficiently. Much of the latter section will focus on tips that can be put into practice starting even today, so I'm pretty excited about this topic. Now, if you have any questions during the webinar, that's great. Just type them into the chat section of GoToWebinar and I'll answer them at the end. Okay, so let's talk about your true hiring need. Hiring does not begin with creating a job opening. This means that just because someone on your team leaves doesn't mean you should immediately hire an exact replacement. It might be a great opportunity for you to hire someone who will add even more to your team, or maybe bring something completely different. I'll help you determine which route to go, starting with understanding what you need, what you have on your team now, and what you can add next. The fact is, you should be hiring to solve problems, not just to add people or keep your team size consistent. Rather than focusing on the new hire itself, let's focus on the problems that you want that new hire to solve. Ask yourself, what is the overall problem we're having? Hint, the answer isn't just that we're busy. As an example, a problem we have on our own customer support team is simply that we have customer emails that need to be responded to quickly. So sure, we're busy, but just hiring an additional human isn't a real solution. Now, once you've determined what needs to be solved, let's translate those problems into tasks that this new hire will need to perform. Here are some examples of how to do that. So if my problem is that we need customer emails responded to quickly, then the task the new hire will need to perform is answering emails within an hour. Our next problem is that we not only need emails to be responded to, but we need the responses to always be factual and empathetic. This means our new hire will also need to learn our product, solve problems based on what they learn, and understand our customers' pain points. Lastly, we need customers to be trained and onboarded onto our platform. So our new hire will be tasked with sharing their knowledge and understanding the different ways customers learn things. Next, we want to translate these tasks into skills and characteristics. This is going to help you determine job requirements and get a picture of the type of person you want to hire. Continuing with the same examples, if our new hire will need to reply to emails within an hour, then I'm looking for someone with a sense of urgency, excellent writing skills, and the ability to troubleshoot. Our new hire will also need to learn the product, solve problems based on what they learn, and understand our customers' pain points. So this translates into someone with technical aptitude, the ability to explain clearly and with detail, and has empathy for others and a natural need to be helpful and kind. Lastly, if they'll need to share their knowledge and understand not everyone learns the same, our ideal hire will also possess excellent teaching skills, patience, and understanding of modes of learning. So now we're at the point where we have a pretty clear picture of the person that would fit well into our existing team. But let's not stop there. Let's talk about how to use this opportunity to level up your team. To do this, create a gap analysis of your current team to determine what its members already have and what is lacking, needed, or wanted to level up your team. Start your gap analysis by answering some basic questions about the people already on the team you're hiring for. Here are some sample questions. What is each team member's superpower? How does each one of them want to grow career-wise? What is in or out of each of their wheelhouses? What unteachable skills do they lack? And what work do they avoid or doesn't bring them joy? These are answers that team leaders should know about their team members. So if you're not hiring for your own team, you should involve the team leader in this step. You'll want to use this information to create a gap analysis chart to determine where your current team has and is lacking skill sets needed to excel at your team's goals. At a glance, a gap analysis can round out your true hiring need by showing you where your team can level up. Here's an example of a gap analysis of our own team ahead of a recent round of hiring. We weren't looking to replace a colleague, but rather add an additional person to help with our growing workload. So while "we're busy" sounded like the reason we were hiring, it wasn't our true hiring need. Now, we had determined that one of the problems we need to solve is training and onboarding customers, and we need to do this via phone. Yet, looking at this gap analysis, no one on our team really enjoyed phone support. So this is the skill set we were lacking and what we should be looking for in our next hire in order to level up our team. This brings me to the concepts of cultural fit versus cultural add, and why it might be time for you to rethink how you're choosing new hires. Rather than finding someone who will fit into your existing company culture, think about finding someone who will expand and add to your company culture. Focusing on hires that will add to your culture will prevent creating a homogenized team, which many teams end up being unintentionally. Instead, cultural add hires can help your team evolve its viewpoints and processes. I have a great example of this from our own team. When I first started with Recruiterbox, we provided mostly email support. Myself and the others on our team excelled at this. Like, you could throw 100 emails a minute at us and we could answer them all without breaking a sweat. As it turns out, this is because we were all pretty introverted. Everyone we hired was pretty similar when it came to personalities, what drove us to excel at work, and what tasks we liked doing. In this case, emailing. We thought this was great because you could add any introvert to our team and we immediately got along with them. Then, as our customer base evolved and grew, we added phone support. And as you can see from the gap analysis, this was a skill set our then existing team lacked. It became apparent that if we continued to hire based solely on culture fit, we were not going to be able to meet the changing needs of our customers. So we had to break that cycle and ask ourselves, how can we add to our culture? How can we hire people who are just a little different and think a little different than we already do, but have the personality types and skill sets that we've identified as gaps in our team? And remember, a company's culture is not just its beliefs and values, but also its perspectives and ways of thinking. While you do want to hire individuals who will uphold your core values, you don't want to hire individuals who think and act like everyone else at your company. You don't want to have an entire team of people who come up with the same ideas or look at a problem and all have the same solution. So I welcome you to think about how this can apply to your own teams and get excited about all the new ideas and ways of thinking new hires can bring to the table. And real quick, I also want you to think about the unteachable skills a new hire should have. You can always teach someone about your team's processes and the apps that you use, but you can't teach someone how to be, for example, curious, empathetic, or organized. So be mindful of these unteachable skills or personality traits when you're interviewing candidates. Now we get to put all of this together to come up with our requirements for the job. Requirements are the skills plus characteristics needed for a person to meet and even excel at the job we're hiring for. Think of skills as a knowledge and education someone has, while characteristics are the personality traits or those unteachable skills. Now here's an example of the skills and characteristics we'd be looking for when adding to our own team. We want someone who is skilled in written and verbal communication, especially phone support. And they should have technical aptitude and excellent teaching skills. We also want someone who is curious to learn, empathetic, and organized. Those are three things we can't teach someone, so they just need to naturally have those unteachable skills. At this point, you should know what problem you're looking to solve, the skills and characteristics your ideal candidate should have, and what gaps your team is facing. And with all of this information, you now know exactly who you need to hire and what they need to bring to the table. So let's get to hiring. Okay, now that you've figured out who your ideal candidate is, we can start the actual hiring process to find that person. The first step is not receiving a resume though. Prior to receiving a resume, you need to build a hiring workflow you can follow and even repeat. And here are our tips for every step of the way. First, let's talk about the job description. This is where it all begins, even before you get a resume. Things to keep in mind. How you frame a job can determine the quality and quantity of candidates you receive. You could be offering the best job in the world, but if you don't describe it accurately or in an appealing way, the right people may not apply, if people apply at all. You should also realize that the job description is your first chance to impress potential candidates. So be mindful of your tone and how you present your company. And lastly, we recommend keeping job descriptions consistent using templates. To do this, create a reusable template that includes everything you want potential candidates to know. The best descriptions I've seen, and the ones that have enticed me to apply, include much more than just a list of requirements. Here's a sample template or structure for a job description. First, start with talking about the company. Let the job seeker know a bit about who they might be working for. This is particularly important if you're not a household name. And if you are, it might be a good space for you to highlight what makes working for you better than working for someone else. Next, talk about the role, of course. You can do this simply by listing what the job is about and what your requirements are, or you can get a little creative by using "you're a good fit if" and "on a typical day you will" statements. I like these because they can help job seekers realize that they'd be a perfect fit for a role that they might otherwise dismiss. Lastly, benefits. What do you have to offer aside from money? This is particularly important if you're hiring for a job that many other companies are also hiring for. Use this space to entice job seekers to apply with you over some other company. Benefits can include 401k match, a liberal vacation policy, work from home options, or my favorite, dog-friendly offices. Next is the candidate's first chance to impress you via their application. But your application form can also say a lot about you, the hiring company. Start with thinking about what you really need to know about every candidate that applies. Use the initial application form to gather bare minimum information that you need from all candidates in order to start screening them. Then use Recruiterbox's questionnaires to learn more about just the candidates you're interested in post-screening. Keeping this in mind can help you balance the length of the application form. Try to avoid questions that aren't relevant to every applicant, and don't make the form too long or tedious to fill out. In fact, consider filling out the form yourself and see how you feel about it. This is all part of the candidate experience, and we want to make sure the candidate is not turned off by the process. Lastly, ask questions with filterable answers to help you during the screening. If there are any answers that would make or break a candidate's eligibility for a position, be sure to have those qualifier questions on your form. Automated responses are another part of the candidate experience and are a great way to jumpstart your communications with candidates. This is your chance to set the tone of your hiring team, outline steps, and set expectations. It's also a great space for you to include more information about the job or your company, further convincing your dream hire that this is their dream job. And if you heeded my warning about keeping your application form short and sweet, you can now choose to attach a questionnaire to your auto response to gather more information about candidates. By the way, if you want to learn more about polishing your application form and auto responses, we did a separate webinar focused solely on the applicant experience. Feel free to email support@Recruiterbox.com for a link to that recording. Moving on, let's talk about your actual hiring process. The hiring stages are the steps you will take a candidate through from application to decision. Create stages for every step of your hiring process, so you always know what a candidate has already completed and what's next for them. Recruiterbox has 4 types of stages: interview, review, offer, and plain. The first 3 are pretty self-explanatory, so I'd like to call out that plain stages are great for task-based steps, such as send eligibility questionnaire or verify references. Lastly, Make sure your team knows who is responsible for and is involved in each stage. Explain what it means when a candidate is moved to their stage and what's expected of them to keep the process moving smoothly. Now comes the actual act of going through applications. So here are my tips for screening. I can almost hear the dread in your voices, but let me tell you, hiring does not have to take your whole day. Employ quick screens and learn to reject early and often. To do this, use Recruiterbox's favorites and job relevance scores to group candidates you get an immediate good feeling about. Then, when it's time to deep dive into applications, start with those candidates first. Also, be on the lookout for like skills on resumes. This means focusing less on company names and job titles and focusing more on the tasks and responsibilities listed that can result in similar skill sets to the ones you're looking for. One of my favorite people who has joined our support team was previously an ice cream scooper. So while her resume wasn't stacked with SaaS companies and online support roles, we could tell she was great with customers, especially face-to-face, meaning she would be great on the phone. Remember, that's a skill set we were lacking on our team. Lastly, reject at the stage and moment you realize the candidate isn't a good fit. Reject early and often. By the time you get to your last stages, you should have a small list of only the best applicants. Now, when it's time to reach out to the candidates, be sure to communicate often and communicate well. This means responding in a timely manner. Remember what it's like to apply to jobs yourself and the feeling of waiting to hear back. Do your potential future teammates a solid by minimizing that anxiety. And remember that the candidate is also interviewing you. If a candidate is unimpressed with you during the hiring process, they may withdraw themselves from consideration. I also recommend using email templates to create a uniform message and tone from your hiring team. This will also save you time from having to type the same things over and over again. And lastly, be clear and set expectations to minimize uncertainty on either side. This will help keep the process moving along and can cut down on follow-up emails. Ready to start interviewing? Clearly outline the interview process and make scheduling easy for both your candidates and your team. Recruiterbox has a great self-scheduling feature that allows candidates to choose an interview slot that works for you and them, cutting down on extra emails to sort out a date and time. Once an interview is set, let candidates know what to expect. This allows them to prepare and bring their A game so that no one's time is wasted. This can be as simple as, hey, this is going to be a video interview. Here's a link to download the app. That way, you don't spend 15 minutes of a 30-minute interview troubleshooting an app installation. A scenario like that might reflect poorly on even the best candidates, when in reality, it's not their fault that they weren't prepared. And my favorite feature in Recruiterbox for interviews is our structured evaluation forms. These allow you to create repeatable and comparable feedback processes, and over time, will help your teammates improve their interviewing skills. Speaking of interviews, let's talk about interview questions to make sure the time you spend with your candidates matter. Interview questions should be intentional and help you pull out information about a candidate that hasn't been shared on their resume, cover letter, or even in an email. Tie questions back to the job's requirements. This means thinking of questions whose answers can help you gauge whether someone meets a requirement or not. So before you ask a question like, what's your biggest weakness? Figure out how their answer can be used to qualify or disqualify them from the position. One question our team leader, Chelsea, asks on interviews is, you need to buy a birthday gift for a friend. How do you determine what to get them? Which might seem like a silly question, but I'm telling you, it works. People who answer something like, I think about what the person likes or what brings them joy, are much higher on the empathy scale than those who might say something like, everybody likes gift cards. Because that's a hint that this person may think of customer support as a one-size-fits-all, when in reality, every time we talk to a customer, we need to focus on them as an individual and what that individual needs in that specific moment. That said, tie answers back to the evaluation forms. So if your evaluation form asks you to give feedback on a candidate's level of empathy, this question can help you determine where they sit on the scale. Finally, let's talk about hiring your dream candidate. Keep in mind that your dream candidate is likely the dream candidate for several companies, and they might have applied to more than just yours. So don't take too long to close the deal. When you have a feeling you found the one, review final feedback quickly, especially if a candidate stands out. Recruiterbox has helpful reminder options in case a colleague is taking a bit long to send you their thoughts. I also recommend utilizing Recruiterbox's offer letters to send offers and collect e-signatures easily and quickly. Our templates and automated processes can get an offer created and sent within minutes. They also include offer expiration dates to make sure the candidates aren't the ones delaying the process. And lastly, don't forget to mark candidates as hired for reporting purposes. Our time to hire and stage movement report can help you understand your average hiring times and identify any bottlenecks. So just to recap, today we went over identifying your true hiring need, including how to use a gap analysis to level up your team, and shifting the idea of cultural fit to cultural add. And we ended with managing your hiring efficiently from creating a job description to extending an offer, including tips for every step of the process.